the NHL, you hear a lot of people cry. And you heard the Ranger fans after the Rangers got eliminated in the Eastern Conference Finals about the Lightning and that the referees were the reason why they were eliminated. And Toronto was out to hurt the New York Rangers and the organization. I would have never thought that the Tampa Bay Lightning and their coach, Jon Cooper, would find a way to make an excuse on why they're losing in this series. In game number 4, when it went to overtime, Jon Cooper wanted to make an excuse on why the Avalanche scored the game-winning goal. And his complaint was there were too many men on the ice. Meanwhile, his team, when the Avalanche scored that goal, when they had 6 guys on the ice and their goaltender, his team, the Lightning, Jon Cooper's team, had 7, 8, counting their goaltender, on the ice. And then at the end of the game, after the game was over, when the press were asking him questions and he was finding a way to point his fingers, it's because they had too many men on the ice. Why we lost. And that could cost us the NHL Stanley Cup. I go back as an Islander fan the year before. Game number 7, second period, 0-0. The Islanders on a power play and the Lightning have a breakaway. They score a goal on Varlamov, which becomes the only goal of game number 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals, which eventually leads the Tampa Bay Lightning to winning that series and then knocking off the Montreal Canadiens in 4 games, which, by the way, were the worst team in the NHL this year. Yep. You sit here now, and if you're an Islander fan, you would not be happy to hear Jon Cooper complain that the reason why they're down 3-1 against the Colorado Avalanche is because there were too many men on the ice.
This is the funny part for me. The Lightning, in 2015, their team that lost to the Blackhawks in the Stanley Cup. 2018, their team that lost to Washington in the Eastern Conference Finals and got shut out in both of their Game 6s and Game 7s. Both those years, they led the league in too many men on the ice penalties. And I'm sure there were plenty of other instances they got away with it where the referees didn't notice because it's one of the toughest things to judge. So you're the one now complaining because Colorado did it. Nathan MacKinnon wasn't 5 feet from the bench when Nazem Kadri initially got on the ice, whatever. You're the one complaining now based on that. So there's 2 other factors to look at. 1, Nazem Kadri has to first touch the puck for Nathan MacKinnon to be able to judge the 5 feet rule, which once he touched the puck, he was fine. He was at the edge of the bench climbing in. You also had another player, one of the defensemen, I think it was Jan Ruda, that was in the same spot trying to climb onto your bench, literally as MacKinnon, parallel on the other side of the ice. Nick Paul was getting off pretty legally. He was fine. So both of you, in essence, had 6 guys on the ice if you want to nitpick on the 5-foot rule. So either both of you had too many men on the ice and they're both illegal, and it's neutral penalties that way, or you're both fine. 5-on-5. Learn the rule. Either way, you have no reason to justify too many men on the ice. The goal was fine. Nazem Kadri broke away. Shout out to him coming back in Game 4 after that injury and scoring the game-winning goal. He's just playing on an inspirational level right now.
Which, by the way, they said that he was not going to show up in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Right. It was going to be a miracle for him to play. And so shout out to him as well. But Jon Cooper, you have no leverage in this situation whatsoever. The hypocrisy from the previous 2 times I mentioned.
How about this? We can replay that goal if you give the Islanders the Stanley Cup from last year. Because the only reason why you possibly won that game was because of that shorthanded goal that should have been called back because you had 7 guys on the ice when you scored. And I think the NHL needs to fix this, especially in the playoffs. You can challenge too many men on the ice in the playoffs. We have seen the NFL change rules because of quarterbacks as they changed a rule now in overtime for Josh Allen, who couldn't get a chance to go and take the ball down the field like Patrick Mahomes did. So if they're changing rules for the playoffs, the NHL should change rules for the playoffs. And I believe that you should challenge too many men on the ice. That is not fair that if the referees don't see it, it counts as a goal and there's no way of challenging it. I think that should be a rule that should be looked at. You don't need a new CBA to change that. The commissioner and the owners need to sit down and look at this situation and figure this out because Tampa Bay has been one of the leading teams in the NHL in the last 3 years to score goals with too many men on the ice.
The way that line changes work, there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of informalities. It's not like a formal substitution in basketball, which could be done on a whistle, or even in football, where you get the whole play clock, the 40 seconds, and if the offense substitutes, the defense can sub too, and the refs will give the time that way. The NHL line changes are very informal. A lot of times it's just one line, 3 players coming off, and they have to do it in a way that isn't always synchronized too. So it's difficult to be able to make those kinds of judgment calls. That's why, maybe something like baseball has with the replay monitors. You have something like a green light that flashes for a good line change, or a red light that flashes for potentially too many men on the ice, and that's something that can be called and relayed to Toronto, and maybe Toronto has its own version of that kind of thing too, to be able to judge something that's too many men on the ice. They could have it like a delayed or known offsides on a potential goal, like they could challenge it like that. Because right now the only things that could be challenged are offsides, goalie interferences, and if a stick is too high above the crossbar on a goal, but that's only on a goal. It's not something that they're going to know right away. Now, I give the NHL credit. They're not like we've seen the NFL in the past where they impulsively blow the whistle and stop a play dead, outside of maybe some scrums on the net. But still, it is something that definitely can be challenged and should be challenged if that is indeed the case. However, Jon Cooper, this is not the case. The Avalanche won the game. It was not too many men on the ice. And even if it was, the Avalanche had 6, you guys had 7.
So right now, it looks like the Avalanche is probably going to win the Stanley Cup. And I remember as they won in 3 overtimes against the Florida Panthers, my Florida Panthers, as John Van Beesbroek versus Patrick Waugh was back and forth, and they swept the Florida Panthers in an unbelievable Game 4 with both goaltenders, Patrick Waugh and John Van Beesbroek, playing out of their minds in 1996 Stanley Cup Finals. So it's not surprising that this young Avalanche team that's been one of the more talented teams in the NHL for the last 3 years, Joe Sakic has been an absolute mastermind building this team from top to bottom. They have one of the best young defensive players in Makar in all of hockey, and McKinnon, and the talent that they have, Kadri, and everybody that they have right now on the offensive side of the puck. They've just been sensational. They really have been. So shout out to the Colorado Avalanche. And I definitely want to see the Colorado Avalanche succeed and win this Stanley Cup. As far as the Rangers are concerned, there are stories coming out. Chris Drury is very upset at Panarin on what he did throughout the playoffs. Now, I don't know what's going to happen this offseason. Panarin is making $12 million a year. He's one of the highest top 4 or 5 players in all of hockey.
I think in certain years it's going to go up to 13.5 too.
And last year broke the assist record in a season for a New York Ranger. He had over 90 points, even on a bad season. And that's a bad season for Panarin. But Panarin did not have a good playoff. And he did not show up against the Tampa Bay Lightning in that series. And when you look at the Rangers and what they're paying this guy to play at the top of his game in the most important time when you need him to step up and put the puck in the net, he just never showed up. I don't know if the Rangers are going to be able to move that contract. I know he's a great player, but he's turning 31 before the season starts next year. And also, you look at Kreider, 50 goals. Are you going to see Kreider do that again? Probably not. You have to decide on getting younger at those star positions. Now, you're going to say they're one of the youngest teams in the NHL, and they are. But right now, you can get a lot for Chris Kreider. And if you can move Panarin, you can get a lot back for Panarin. So you're in a really good position. You have one of the best defensemen in the NHL, young defensemen in the NHL. You have one of the best young goaltenders in the NHL. You have a rebuilt kid line. If you bring back Kakko, and with Lafreniere and Keto, that could be a force for a line for the Rangers for many, many years to come. So I think the Rangers are positioned very, very good with some of the young players. And even Miller, they have players, but they need to figure out what they're going to do with the veteran players. I think you have some players that you want to keep on this team. I just don't know if Panarin fits where this team's going to be in the next couple of years.
Now, again, being that they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, they don't have to make any kind of like overreactionary type things. Yes, Chris Drury has every right to be disappointed about the way Panarin played in the playoffs, because not only was he flawed defensively like he usually is, he also looked hesitant, which is not like him and not like what you would want to see out of a veteran player. Sometimes you saw that with young players. Kakko, when he first entered the league, definitely was not confident in his shot a lot of the time. You even saw that with Barzal in his second year. Like, sometimes he wouldn't shoot. He would pass up a good shot attempt and try to dangle or try to pass. You're not expecting to see that with Panarin, who's a veteran player, a guy that's been in the league for 8 years. And that's a little bit of concerning. So hopefully maybe it's just a mental thing with him, playoff will, because he's had good playoffs in the past. Now, Now, he didn't have a big role with Chicago. He was a third line, sometimes second line type player with them. So he wasn't going to showcase himself like Kane and Taves were and hosts on those Stanley Cup teams. But he had a good playoff with Columbus, stretches where he was good for the Rangers, but nothing special in the playoffs yet. And that's a big problem when Kreider has played well in the playoffs. Zibanejad had a 10-game point streak in the playoffs. So it's not like you had a bad line that you were working with. These are two of the most talented players, not overall in the playoffs, but overall for the Rangers. So that's a big mental thing that I think Panarin will have to overcome. I wouldn't try to trade him right now unless you could get like really an insane haul, but I really don't do that. I told you last show I would not trade Kreider because he does bring under a thing. Yes, I don't expect him to score 50 goals again, but he passes well, he hits well, he's a good
penalty
leader.
Killer. We all know shorthanded.
Great leader.
Top 5 players shorthanded goals this year. So he has all the intangibles that you need, but I think that being that he had his best season, you can get a lot back. You can get an overhaul back for him. Teams would be interested in bringing in a leader and a guy that could put the puck in the net and could do all the other intangibles that they're looking for. So I think you move with Kreider and Panarin, but I don't know what Drury is planning to do going into the offseason. So that'll be interesting moving into the draft after the season is over.